All right. Good evening, Cross Church, and welcome to our monthly deep dive. This is something that we like to do each month, where we take a little bit of time and go back over the sermons that we've been going through, and just go a little bit deeper. Try to take the discussions that we've had on Sunday morning and continue them. Think more deeply about them. Think about how they affect our daily lives, and it's just a really great conversation that we get to have once a month. So I'm really excited to be doing that again this evening. Before we get into it, I want to let you guys know about a couple things. So one, this week is the first week that our groups are starting for this semester. So I love Grow Groups. I think that it's really important for us as a church and for all Christians to grow in relationship with other people, that our relationships that we build with other Christians are what help us to grow in our relationship with Jesus. And so we at Cross Church have a bunch of different options for Grow Groups. You can sign up for those on our website. If you go to crosschurchdenton.org/groups, we have all different kinds that we'd love for you to sign up for. And as we have just finished a sermon series called The Love Connection that we're going to be talking about tonight, we're going to be jumping in the month of March to a new sermon series called Created for Significance, and talking about what God has given us as our purpose, as our mission, about what we're supposed to be living out as Christians. And so I'm really excited about that. So be sure to tune in on Sundays. You can watch online on Facebook and or YouTube as you are doing now, or you can reserve your seat to come in person to do that as well. So let me talk a little bit just about the series that we've been in. So we were doing a series called The Love Connection. And this series is all about how Jesus is the connection of love between all things, all people in the world. And we had this triangle graphic that I think we're going to try and throw up for you that basically has Jesus at the center and his love at the center. And his love is what helps God to love us and us to love God, and as well for us to love others, and then for God to love others as well. And so it's Jesus is this connection that brings all people together. And so we had 4 weeks. We talked about the first week. We said, when you see love, you can be love. And so we see the love of God, and then we can be love toward others. The second week, we talked about the significance of love and how love is the greatest, and love is the goal, and love is the best way to live. And this is the significance of love. The third week, we talked about how we can show love Jesus style, that Jesus has a very unique way of showing love through sacrifice. And so we get to show that as well. And then this last week, we talked about how we can live love, how it is a life filled with love that we should be doing. And so that's kind of a real brief recap of the Love Connection series. So I'm excited to get into it tonight. As we do so, I'm excited to introduce to you my friends, Damarian and Brent. You guys want to say anything in by way of introduction about yourselves? No. No. All right, great. They're awesome. That's my introduction for them. We do have like the dude crew tonight. Just kind of worked out that way. We're going to be 3 dudes talking about love. It's going to be awesome. Super excited. Very manly. So, but we're excited, and it's going to be great, and I'm looking forward to it. So, Brent, would you pray, and then we'll get into some of the questions.
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for allowing us to gather here today. I pray that your name will be glorified in everything that we say. I pray that the conversation that we have will touch someone, if not more than one person. Lord, I just pray that you would be in this room with us as we're speaking and just guide our thoughts and our words. In your name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. And I did forget to mention, I always forget this, but it's very important. We want to hear from you. And so you can, in the comments, if you have questions about the sermon series that you've been wrestling with for the last few weeks, about particular things that we've talked about on Sundays, or about ways that this applies to your life specifically, we'd love to hear that and to answer those questions. So you can comment online, and we'll get those comments, and we'll be able to ask those questions throughout tonight. So we have some prepared, but honestly, I would rather answer your questions than the ones that I wrote. So we'd love to hear from you guys and do that. So be writing in the comments. But to begin, though, I just wanted to start with this question. I think that in our culture, we talk a lot about love, and in this sermon series, we talked a lot about love. And like I should have gone back and counted, but I think we said the word love like thousands of times in the 4 weeks. But I think that it's sometimes unclear about like what that means. So I just wanted to begin and ask, like, how do you define love? What is love defined as?
For me, I would say I define love as a lifestyle. I know people kind of define it as like a feeling or an emotion, but to me, you have to have a lifestyle of love in order to fully grasp what love is. And love is Jesus. Love is God. So I don't think that you can. I don't think that you can ever experience the fullness of love without having a relationship with God. You know, sure, there are people out there that are not saved that, you know, say they love. And I think they're right to a certain degree, but there's a spiritual level of love that you will never reach unless you have God's love in you, because you're incapable of projecting that kind of love to anyone else without God being in you. So I define love as a lifestyle.
Yeah.
I guess for me, it's more of an action word. It's taken on being an action as opposed to, like Brent was saying, an emotion or a feeling. It's more of a doing thing. I mean, because like you said in the question, it's like everybody says, you know, it's a loose word, but it's one of those things where it's like you have to talk the talk and walk the walk. And so love to me now is more of an action thing as opposed to just how I feel or what I think of you.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think both of you guys said stuff about like love is kind of what we do. It's a lifestyle, it's an action. So what are maybe some actions that are actions of love? Like, can you give an example of what that looks like?
And this happened before Melissa and I exchanged the word I love you, or the 3 words I love you. We had just started dating, so this was a bold request of hers. It was raining outside, and the mantle, or the little, you know, that little plastic thing that's underneath the car that's supposed to like, it's supposed to keep you from scraping things. Well, anyways, she had scraped some stuff, and so she was driving around, and she's like, "There's this weird sound underneath my car," and I'm like, "Oh, all right." She's like, "Well, do you think you can handle it? You know, you can come give it a look." Mind you, that day it was raining outside, like heavy rain. And she's like, "Well, I'm afraid to drive. I don't want anything bad to happen." And I was sitting in history class. I don't like history class anyway, but I wasn't really trying to go outside and deal with something like that. But I was like, you know what? I'll do it. So I went out there in the rain, and I pulled off that long piece of plastic that comes underneath every car. I pulled it off while it was raining and the ground was soaked, and I put it in her trunk, and I said, I think you're going to be okay. And I threw it in her trunk, and I went home to shower afterwards, because I was basically in the wet gravel, for about 15 minutes trying to unscrew this thing.
Some major points that day.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
It worked out all right.
No, it was definitely raining that day.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, so it's, you know, love is doing stuff that you don't want to do in weather that you don't like, and
Yeah.
that's good because it serves someone else. Yeah.
Like service, that kind of goes along with what you said. Just the concept of putting somebody else's needs above your own is like easy to say, but it's another ball game when you actually not have to do it, but you find yourself doing it. Sometimes you look back and you say, man, like I genuinely care about this person's needs over my own. And a lot of times you overlook it as, you know, you don't really make the correlation like that's love. You just feel like, you know, I'm supposed to do this for this person. So I would say service is a big example of love, because it means you're giving up time, you're giving up you for somebody else. And what do people value more than money? They value their time. Those are like the two things that most people value. So to give that up, to give it to someone else, to me is a pretty common sign of love.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. You're giving up you for someone else. I think that's a really good way to say it. And I think sometimes I sit and just like think about like how often the things that I do each day are like what I want to do, and like even when it like doesn't really even seem like it, but it's like this is a thing that I don't really want to do, but like I want to get it done right now, and so it's still like kind of the thing that I want instead of like going to think about someone else and think about what their needs are and how I can serve them. So yeah, that's good. I like that. So like we talked about a lot during this series is the love of God and how God has loved us. That's kind of the beginning. 1 John says we love because he first loved us. And I think you said earlier, Brent, that God is love. Jesus is love. So how have you personally experienced God's love in your life? What does that look like for you?
Oh man. Just what he's blessed me with. I mean, I could easily go down a list of, things that have happened to me, circumstances, but even if I were to dissect those circumstances, I could still find God's love in those circumstances. Like, it's easy to focus on the bad things that have happened, but I could also focus on some good things that have come from those bad situations. So God's love is in everything that happens to you in your life. Yeah. Whether you see it or not is a different story, but his love is in everything that you do. It's in everything that you go through. It's in everything that you would come across in your lifetime. His love is intertwined in that, and the depth of your connection to him is how much of that you'll see. Sometimes you'll focus so much on the bad things of life that you miss God's love a lot. You miss witnessing it a lot because the circumstance becomes so big and God becomes so small that you don't see his love for you. So I think if you just stop and look, you'll see his love in everything, about and bad.
Yeah, that's good, and that's hard to do. I mean, I think like most of the time, it's our circumstances, like you said, are just so big.
Yeah,
it's so hard to see past that to what God, the deeper thing that God is trying to do. That's good. Yeah. What about you, Dwayne?
I would say for me, it's been more recently like his grace and his forgiveness, not just through Melissa, but also just through conversations with him, and I guess when you go down the laundry list of things that you should have done better, or things that you knew you could have done differently, and you ask yourself in the back of your mind, I was like, man, was that enough to push him away? And then still, he has a way of reminding you, he's like, no, not even that. I still love you despite, I understand that, this is a challenging area for you. And it really is. I mean, I know everybody's got something out there where it's like, man, I would love to get past this. I would love to live a life without this. But I think when you're able to wholeheartedly and transparently admit to yourself and to God that, man, this is really just an area for me that I battle with, and you give himself the opportunity to come in and show you grace, love, and mercy. It's like I feel like so often a lot of people, me specifically, you try to be perfect at everything. But it's like when you are constantly dressing yourself up, it's almost like you're putting a wall between, God's different avenues to show us, love. It's almost like you're telling yourself, I have to be perfect before God can love me. And that's completely backwards.
Yeah.
So I thought for me, that's been a big reminder for me, is that the grace and the love comes through being transparent with yourself and with him.
Yeah, that's good, because it's so easy for us to pretend like just try to pretend like everyth's fine and like we're, but it's actually because we think that that's going to make us feel better, but actually where like true love and peace resides is not in getting it right all the time, but in the grace. So that's really good. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think for me, one thing that I was thinking about too is just like other people. Like I think so often the people in our lives are just such a blessing, and the ways in which, like I was thinking about, I'm sometimes I'm like not the best friend when I'm like not close to someone. So like I don't live near any of my like college friends or whatever, so I just don't talk to them, even though I like love them and whatever. And so I just like I was talking to one of my college friends a couple weeks ago and hadn't talked to him in a really long time, and it just like it was such a blessing of a conversation. And I was like, you could like kind of be annoyed at me, but he wasn't at all. And so I think sometimes blessings through other people and the love that other people show us is also one of those things. So, yeah. All right. So the first week we talked about how we can see the love of God and how important it is that we kind of like change our perspective so that we can see the love of God in everything. And kind of like you were just talking about this a minute ago, how even in the midst of bad things, God is still loving us in the midst of hurt and pain. So how do you shift your perspective in that moment? How do you be able to see and recognize God's love even in the midst of hurt and pain and suffering?
For me personally, it's a process, man. It's definitely a process. It's not something that you can just say, you know what, I'm going to do that starting right now. Yeah. I mean, you can say that, but it's definitely a process, and it takes deliverance, and it takes purpose to do it. Like, it's not just going to happen by osmosis. Like you have to make a choice to say, I'm just going to change my perspective. I'm going to put myself in a position to see God in this circumstance, and that's going to involve prayer. That's going to involve reading His Word. That's going to involve devotion, and it's going to involve a support system of people who, especially having people in your life whose faith is stronger than yours, who's been through some things that can show you God when you can't see God, and they can talk to you and point you back to God. Because a lot of times, your mind, I listen to Dr. Evans a lot, Tony Evans, and he has this statement that is so true. He says that when you're going through a trial or a circumstance and you're feeling despair or depression, the worst conversation that you can have is with yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes I often find myself talking to myself in the midst of a trial and a circumstance, and it's the worst conversation to have. Yeah. So those are the times that I feel like I'm trying now, that when I get into those moments, those are the moments that I make a choice to just pick up a Bible. And sometimes I pick my Bible up and prayed, and it's like, Lord, I'm going to open this Bible, and I pray that I land on a verse that helps me. Yeah. And I can tell you every time I've done that, I've opened the Bible and just flipped pages and stopped, and it was a verse there, and it scared me. I'm like, wait a minute, dude, like this, I said something like what I was going through, not like the exact verse that is talking about what I'm going through. So I think it's in those moments when you feel that you're losing that connection, and that's when you have to purposely find God in your struggle. You have to look for Him. Yeah.
That's good. I like you said, it's a choice, and it's like it's a daily choice. It's not, it's not a one time and then it just.
Multiple
but
times
it's
a day.
yeah, right.
Like,
well, all the time.
Minute by minute, you have to say, I'm getting there. All right, I got to find you. I'm going to find you. Kind of like when Moses was in the wilderness and he saw the bush, he made the choice to go toward it.
Yeah.
Like, you can either go toward it or you can not go toward it, but you have to, especially in those wilderness type moments. Yeah. You have to make the choice to go toward it.
Yeah, to press deeper into God instead of running from Him. That's good. Yeah. What about you, Demian?
I'm gonna say what he said because I think he did a really good job. It's like, yeah, you have to be intentional about it, especially when you're in the midst of that, and you're caught like dead center in the storm. I read an article I can't remember. It was Desiring God, and they talked about the dark night of the soul, and I was like, "What?" And I hear that a lot when it comes to the Christian faith, dark night of the soul. And they said it's pretty much when you're flying blind, and you have to hold steady to, you have to reach out and hold on to the words that were spoken to you, when you were younger, when your parents tried to, when they worked to put that word in you. And I think and I'd like to say that they just stop, that those dark nights end. That they stop coming, and it's like, and the harsh truth is that they don't. But as they do come, it's like you have to be intentional. One of the scriptures that got me through the beginning of lockdown was that I keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on me. And something so simple. It sounds simple, but it's like that intentional effort to choose God over the news, to choose God over your media feed, to choose God over what your friends or family may be panicking about. It's like, man, you have to make a conscious choice, like you said, minute by minute, second by second, to choose God over everything else and make sure that you stay focused on God, because it's so easy to get swept away by everything else. And so that conscious effort, that's a loose muscle until you get into the rhythm of it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, what he said.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people, it's like there's a misconception that in order to do that, you have to kind of ignore your storm.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I found that you don't ignore it.
You lean into
You have to know full well, because some storms are, the worst thing you've ever dealt with in your life up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you come to grips with how much of a storm you're in, it's going to feed your willingness and your desire to go deep. You're going to have to go deeper, because if you don't recognize just how deep of a storm you're in, that's going to directly affect how much of an effort that you put into changing your perspective.
Yeah.
So I hate to say embrace the storm, but yeah, you got to embrace it for what it is, and don't deny your feelings. Don't deny it. It's okay to say you're depressed. It's okay to say you're in despair. I've had prayer conversations with God where I told him, man, like, I don't have my faith is gone. My trust is wavering. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna keep going. I need you to show me how to continue to go, even though I'm going through this. Like, I'm not gonna, even though he knows your heart, but he wants you to bring that to him, because that shows how much you trust him with your real feelings. So definitely don't ignore your storm. You got to acknowledge it for what it is, and then that's going to feed your desire to want to go and hide under God, man, to try to get some relief from it.
Yeah, that's good. It's such a it's a thing we see over and over again in Scripture too. Just like people being honest with God about where they're at, and that's what He desires. He doesn't want us to try to like make everything, fix it, and then come to Him. He wants us to come to Him and let Him fix it. And so, I think that's good. And I liked too what you said, Demarian, about it being a muscle, because I think that helps think about, like, one thing is, a lot of the I don't want to say it's. Let me think about how I want to say this right.
Say it as it is. Say it as it is.
Well, I just when you get into a lot of the preparation comes before the storm, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, like, once you get into it, you should have already like been preparing and maybe, if you haven't done that, God can redeem all of that and anything. But it's going to be easier for you in that, I think, if you've been already doing those things, already seeking God, already preparing for that. And in the smaller storms, if you go to God in the smaller storms, it helps grow you and prepare you for the bigger ones. So I think a lot of it happens on the front end too. So
and just one last thing, I like what you said about embracing it, because that seems countercultural now. It's like, just in the last 5-10 years, it's like, the world as a whole has developed a culture of like escaping anything that's uncomfortable, anything that's stressful, anything that creates anxiety. There's a way to escape. There's a way to get away, and the escape routes are just multiplying massively, and so we got a world full of people who are afraid to, lean into these things. It's say, you know what, I'm experiencing something that's very uncomfortable. What's the quickest way to alleviate? So ibuprofen is taking on all kinds of forms now. And, like Brent was saying, it's like sometimes, and this is what my wife and I learned now, is like sometimes you just got to lean into that. But as you're leaning in, you've got to pray at the same time. You can't just like lean into it, because then you'll get swept away. It's like you got to speak with God so he can guide you through this whole thing. But I mean, that's a tough thing to do anyway.
Yeah.
Especially now when the world tells you you don't have to feel bad. There's ways to get away from it. You can just, everything is run away instead of just running. But it's like, what are you running to if you're not running to God?
Yeah, the Bible says that Jesus is the fullness of truth and grace. So it's like we have to face the reality of the truth of our situation, and that's where we find the grace of God and the grace of Jesus. So yeah, that's good. All right, so when in the second week, one of the things that PV talked about was how love is the best way to live, right? Like love is the best way that we can truly live our lives. But I think like one of the things that I was thinking when he was talking about that is like sometimes it doesn't feel like that. Like when you're out in the rain, in the gravel, you're like, is this really like the best way that I could live my life right now? Am I living my best life in the gravel? And so I guess my question just would be like, why do you think, even with those difficult parts of it, love still is the best way to live your life?
I want to say that because there's something deeply satisfying in that kind of sacrifice, but I'm hesitant because it's like it doesn't feel that way like in the moment, like when you're in the middle of having to like show that kind of love or show that kind of sacrifice. You're like, wow, this is really uncomfortable. I don't really see the immediate benefit in any of this. But right now it made me think about, when Christ was on the cross. It's like I'd imagine, all that he endured on the way didn't feel good on his way to the cross and while he was being nailed to it. I don't imagine any of that was something he'd relive if he had the choice. So it's like it's in those moments. Maybe it's thinking of the good that comes after, not necessarily anything tangible, but the benefit of the sacrifice, maybe, is why it's the best way to live life, because you know that in the sacrifice or by, putting somebody else first, you know that you're glorifying God in some way, and that, you, by your little actions, you may be the catalyst for a big change in how they see things and how, they understand the world. So.
Yeah, that's good. What about you, Brent?
When you asked that question, it kind of took me back to this past Sunday, like your sermon. I feel like your message pretty much answered that question perfectly. And I don't have your exact words, but I think you said something like, living a life of God's love is like you're being in the perfect will of God. Like if you live love, then you are living exactly the way God commanded you to live. And it's not comfortable sometimes. And living love grows all of the other aspects of you as a Christian, because to live love, you got to have faith, because sometimes you don't know what the result of your love is going to be. You got to trust because you don't know where it's going to take you. And you really get to, I guess living love is maybe the closest depiction that we'll get to maybe understanding how Jesus lived. Because that living love also applies to people that won't show it back to you, that will take it and take advantage of you, that will try to manipulate, thinking on their end, they're thinking it's weakness, and they will try to manipulate that love. And living love is a risk. Like, love is a risk. You open yourself up for someone to take advantage of it all the time. But you have to go into it knowing that can happen. And sometimes it sucks, but you have to let it happen. And in order to carry out whatever God's will is for you in that situation, it may involve you allowing that to happen. And that doesn't feel good either. But I guess you just got to stay focused on, what God's end goal is for you. And sometimes you don't know that, and that's where he grows you in every aspect of your life when you decide to live a life of love, like God's love.
Yeah, yeah, that's good, and like that what you said about trust, like that, where we're opening ourselves up, and that really is a huge act of trust in God. That I'm gonna love this person, and I have no idea if they're gonna love me back. I have no idea if they're gonna return the favor, or if I'm gonna kind of come out equal or on top in this situation or whatever. It's just I'm gonna love this person regardless of the consequence, regardless of where it ends up, and let God handle that. That's a huge act of trust. That's good.
Or just loving a person who has already like done something devastatingly hurtful to you.
Yes.
And against all your human emotion and your human inclination, you choose to love God's way anyway.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel, humanly, it makes you feel weak.
Yeah.
It makes you feel like a doormat. But
Yeah.
you have to go past that and understand that, you know, this is God's love. I mean, and I have to do it. If I say I'm following him, then I don't have a choice. There is no rationalization required. You just have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's I mean, that's something that I wanted to get to tonight anyway, because I think I am sure that every one of us can think of somebody like that in our lives, who just like that is a person who, for whatever reason, feels unlovable, like they've hurt us, or they are just like constantly grinding our gears, or whatever. It's there are people in our lives that are hard to love, and that especially, I think, like what you said, with people who have hurt us. And that, so how do you guys find the strength or the ability to be able to love those kinds of people?
I don't have it. It's God. I'll tell you straight up, I don't have it.
Yeah.
If it was up to me, I wouldn't do it at all. Yeah. So that's when you dig in and you say, God, love this person through me. Give me the strength to look, because that kind of love, you're not capable of producing it on your own. You have to have Christ in you in order to love someone that way, because humans, with our sin nature, we're not built that way. We're built to protect our feelings and our emotions and ourselves. And it's like, hey, that person did this to me. I'm not going to help you. You hurt me. Now you're asking me for help? No.
Yeah.
You made your bed, now lie in it. That's the world's philosophy when it comes to love. But in order to love somebody in a way that is not fathomable by somebody that doesn't believe in God, is only God. I mean, and going through that personally, it always takes me back to like putting myself in a position where I'm looking at Jesus. He's looking at his own people, and they're mocking him, and they're spitting on him, and they're laughing at him, and he looks out there and he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Like, there's no greater love than that. Yeah. And it's that kind of love, that kind of spirit that needs to be in us in order to allow us to love people that hurt us, not even a fraction of that, but hurt us to the point where in our own capacity we cannot love them.
Yeah, that's good. What about you, Demaya?
Love someone who seems unlovable. I think what I have to do, not what I think, what I know I have to do is I have to think about all the love that God has given me and all the things that, you know, I have done, you know, all the sins I've committed against him. I'm like, you know, he didn't let me go in those moments. And, you know, and he's without flaw. So if he can love me, you know, and all the, you know, all the most wanted pictures I probably have somewhere, you know, in heaven, if he can see past all of that, and say, I love you anyway, it's like, then surely someone who is with sin, can look at someone else who's at the same capacity as I am and say, you know what? Because God loved me, I am obligated. You know, maybe obligated is a bad word, but, you know, maybe that's just where I am. It's like, look, this is a chore for me. I don't necessarily feel love for you, but out of the love that God has shown me, I'm going to choose this moment to be quiet. to not retaliate, to not, say anything that could potentially make you feel anything but love. I maybe me feeling that, maybe me showing that love could just be me taking it on the chin. I was like, okay, I'm gonna take it. Like Brent was saying, I'm gonna take this hit, and I'm not gonna respond. I'm not gonna, because it's not what God would want me to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I have to bring myself home. I was like, all right, remember all those offenses you committed in your day. Just remember.
It's important to know also that loving that way, to some degree, is going to cost you something.
Yeah.
It's going to cost you an ego. It's going to cost you something.
Yeah.
But the reward will definitely outweigh the cost. But when you love that way, you must prepare yourself that it's going to cost you in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's always, I mean, it really goes back to Jesus. I mean, his love cost him.
Yeah.
And when we love in the same way, we're drawing from the well of God's love, and it's the same kind of sacrificial love. So we had a question from online. So the question is, in what ways is God's love different from society's version of love? So it's like society, culture talks about love. That's one thing. God's love. What's different about those?
Just right off the top of my head, God's love is sacrificial. Society's love is selfish. God's love is grace. You don't have to do anything to get it. Society's love is, what have you done for me lately? And I'll love you as long as you're doing this. But when you stop doing this, then we just drifted apart. Yeah. We just grew apart. Yeah. Societal love is performance-based. God's love is, it's a free gift. Just come get it.
Yeah. Conditional and unconditional. And, it's to say that our society loves at all that's a slippery slope. I mean, just based off the events that take place, which is within the last year, you've got a slew of people who have, claimed to know and love God, and it's just like one of those things. It's like, and then you witness, the deeds out in the world, and you're like, this is backwards. This is all wrong. And to make it more personal for me, it's like I was saying, it's like, human love is conditional. It's like I can love you as long as, there are certain lines that you cannot cross. It doesn't even necessarily have to be that you have to do something for me. It's like there are just certain things that you cannot do, or a certain type of person that you have to be. And and it sucks saying that out loud, but, it's one of those things that it's true. If you look inside yourself, well, for me, I'll say for me, it's like there are moments where, like, I've got, close, I don't want to say family or friends, because I don't want anybody I know looking at themselves like, have I crossed that boundary? It's like, but I just know for me, I have had a lot of situations like that in my life where I'm like, you know what? Because you've crossed this line, or you said this thing to me, it's like, I was like, you talk about burning a bridge, like that happened, like instantly. I was like, oh, you said that to me? We're done. We're done.
That's not necessarily. How am I going to say this?
Say it.
That's not necessarily invisible in Christian love either.
True.
Because you can definitely love someone with the love of Christ, but know that intimacy or a relationship with this person is toxic.
True.
So you can it's possible to draw boundary lines and still have that unconditional Christ love for somebody. You just know that sometimes the best way to love somebody is from afar, to pray for them.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best way you can love somebody is to say a prayer for them. But that interaction with this person at that particular moment is detrimental to you emotionally, mentally.
True.
Maybe even physically sometime. Yeah. So, boundaries are not necessarily a bad thing, but they cannot be the basis for or the foundation for your love.
Yeah.
Like what you said, man, and that's so true, is that people put boundaries on love, and they even try to intertwine, unconditional love into a conditional situation, and it doesn't mix.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
That's a complicated question.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated
It
question.
is a complicated question.
It has infinite answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's good because I think it is like I think sometimes love looks different depending on the situation. Like kind of what you're saying. Even like in Scripture, in the New Testament, sometimes there's like Paul is like that dude's doing that. Like he needs to be out of the church, you know. And that sometimes you read that and you're like, that seems a little weird. But I think it's like the idea is still love. It's just a different kind of love. Like I need to set a boundary.
Yeah.
And that actually can be an act of love or whatever. So yeah, that's good. But I think that sacrificial aspect of it is huge. That God's love is what has sacrificed for us, and that we are going to have to sacrifice for other people. And I think I was thinking about when you were talking about conditional love. So like I have this board this whiteboard in my house that I have like each of our kids' names on it, and like I write "I love you because," and then whatever some reason why I love them, which I haven't done a very good job keeping up with it, but that's all right. But one of the things I think about sometimes is I'm like I hope this isn't communicating the wrong idea, because it's not like I love you like because you do these cool things. I just like sometimes I just love you because I love you, and I want to like express reasons why I love you. But I think that's where, even if you stopped doing all of those things, even if my kids stopped being the awesome kids that they are, I would still love them. And I think that's kind of the love of God, that even if we fail every test, if we rebel in every way, God still loves us. That's like literally the story of the Bible and the gospel.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. That's good. Online question, keep them coming. We appreciate it. So one of the things PV talked about, he talked about the story of the Good Samaritan, and how this guy had kind of been considered outside of the zone of people's love, and so how do you think, or maybe where do you think people tend to draw lines and say like, okay, this person's going to be in my zone, this person's going to be outside my zone, I'm going to love these people but not those people? How do you think people like draw those lines, and then maybe how can we push past them?
I think the tricky part about that one is recognizing, where your capacity is to love. It's like where where your limits are. It's like, okay, say you know someone and they're very, they're not unlovable, but it's like they have some very difficult things for you to handle. But as Christians, we're called to love unconditionally, and so in those moments, you have to like, for me anyway, I have to like come to myself and say, okay, this is what you're doing. I'd like for you to stop doing it, but I have acknowledged that it is not within your character to not be this way. So instead of not loving you, I now have to find, I guess, creative ways to do what I'm asked to do, so that I can still communicate and act towards you in love. And that's a fresh thing for me. I know that sounds weird to say, oh, you're new at loving, Demarion. Yeah, I am. I'm new at this loving thing, because
That's not weird.
I've, the last few years I've had my way of loving, and it just recently dawned on me, that's wrong. Well, what am I supposed to do now? I've lived this way for so long. What do you mean it's wrong? It's wrong. It needs to be overwritten. So when I find myself in those moments, I have to go back to what the Word says, and things that the Lord and I have spoken about, and I have to like take those little actions. He's not asking me to go from like 0 to 100 immediately. It's like, okay, we've just acknowledged that this is a problem for you, so we're going to take baby steps. Don't think you need to go out and try to save every soul immediately. He's like, start by just, like you were saying, it starts in the church. It starts, in your immediate home. What are little things that you can do here and there to communicate, and to exercise God's power of love in you, on a regular basis. I don't know if that was part of the question. What was it? People living people outside your zone?
Yeah.
I guess you have to rely on God to open your zone up and know that He's going to do it in a way that is good for growth. You know, He's not going to ask you to go out and love 10 people you don't like immediately. I mean, He may, but I feel like He'd recognize your capacity. He's like, look, we're going to start with one person. I'm going to get you to love this one person. And then we're going to work our way up to that one person who I know you don't like. And we're going to take baby steps. So to me, I feel like that's how it works. It's like He kind of just expands it little by little. And, you know, before you know it, you kind of widen your circle a little bit. You become more accepting. You become more understanding. You become more empathetic, you know. Instead of, you know, viewing the world or people through, you know, your fractured lens of, you know, your experiences or how you've decided you're going to govern yourself, it's like you start letting God's love transform how you behave, how you act, and how you think little by little. Yeah. So, yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, that's good. It's the like small first step and I liked how you said like think about creative ways. Like I think sometimes that is what it is. It's like what is like the like one thing that I can do that I like really can do that's not an unrealistic, because sometimes it's like an unrealistic, like I'm gonna go whatever, like have this perfect relationship with this person that I really don't get along with or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what is the one thing that I can do right now that takes the first step? That's good. Yeah. What about you, Brent?
I think you have to be able to recognize your tendencies and why you draw lines and boundaries. And most of the time, the things inside of your boundary, the people inside of your boundary are easy to love. You're going to draw that line around the people that is easiest to love, or the people in your life that is like a no-brainer, like a child or a parent. You know, it's almost like instinctual to love them. Yeah. And the people that are outside of your boundary are the people that it takes some work to love. So I think the first part of the question is, why do people draw boundaries? I think they draw boundaries to alleviate work.
Yeah.
It's easy to draw that boundary and say, hey, these people here, oh, these are my people. I don't take nothing to love them. But those two over there, I don't know. You know, I'm going to keep them from a distance, or I'm going to pray for them. You know, I'm going to pray for them. You know, so you have to understand why you draw those boundaries. And then, to me, that almost gives you a better sense of what to ask God to open up in you to be able to love them. You have to recognize your tendencies and why you do things that you do. And sometimes you can't do that by yourself. That's why I'm a big advocate of therapy and talking to someone who can dissect you in a way that you will never dissect yourself. Yeah. And you learn a lot about yourself sometimes talking to somebody else. And I mean, it doesn't have to be a counselor. It can be a mentor. It can be a friend, a parent, someone that can show you in a way that you would never see you. And sometimes when you can learn your tendencies and why you do the things you do, then for me personally, it creates a more effective prayer to God. So I know exactly where I need help, and I know exactly where I need you to work on me so that I can open up my boundaries. And not only will I open the boundaries, I know you're going to show me how to approach that person. The first initial approach, how do I do that in order to break that ice? And, you know, we may not be, you know, pen pals, but I may be able to at least, you know, show God's love to this person in some way, shape, or form, because I've opened myself up to be able to do that, because I know why I've been shutting that person out.
Yeah, that's good. I think one of the things that just for me personally, I think that has helped kind of like in the loving outside the zone is just like simply listening. I think sometimes listening is like one of the greatest acts of love that we can do. And sometimes it's hard work. It's work to spend time and to really like try to truly listen and not just kind of listen from our perspective. But I think that's kind of a good first step. And like, can I listen to this person? And as I begin to understand them more, that's I guess what I found is just that the people in my life that are maybe outside of my zone, it's taken me to come to a place of understanding them. Even and that's kind of what gives me the ability to love them better, even if I'm not like fully there. We're never like we're best buds or whatever, but I can understand who they are and where they're coming from and how I can love them. So
that listening part, that's good. That's good. Like listening to listen and not listening to respond.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's hard. It's real hard.
It's very hard.
It's good. Well, if you are online, I have one more question. So if you have one, send it in now, and then we'll kind of begin to wrap up. So my last question for you guys is this: is just simply, we talked a ton about love and about like the different ways that God has loved and we have loved, and so I just kind of wanted to end like, what are some really simple, practical ways that you think that we can live love as a church? So whether that's like individually or the church as a whole, like what's something that the people watching could do like tonight or tomorrow or this weekend to show love?
I would say simply, everyone you encounter, see them the way Jesus would see them. Look past what they're wearing, look past their lifestyle choices, look past anything that would humanly distort your opinion of this person. Get rid of it. Look at people the way Jesus would look at them. He looked at everyone with love. And that's not easy, but that's the simplest answer that I can come up with, is to see the world and see people like Jesus sees them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I had a friend who worked in a homeless ministry in Chicago for a while, and one of the things that she said to me is that almost a bigger issue in terms of like their physical needs were emotional needs, in just that nobody looks at them. Nobody sees them. Nobody treats them like a human being. And so I have had to make an intentional effort, because, like, you know, when you see somebody on the street and you're like, you think they're going to come and ask you for money or whatever, it feels awkward. But just to, like, stop and look at them and ask them their name or whatever. And I think that's true across all of our relationships, that seeing them, like truly seeing them the way Jesus sees them, that's really good. Yeah.
And I got to give a plug to my oldest son, because he actually is the person that pushed me to change in that direction. Yeah. Because sometimes you're raised to see people in a certain light, and as Christians, unfortunately, we have that bad, where we see people that don't fit our lifestyle. So our first reaction is to disassociate with those people because they're not Christians. But the more you get in, my oldest son always looks at everybody through what they look like, and he looks into them, and he looks at them with this unapologetic love that, you know, I'm not looking at you because of how you live or how you look or what you believe or who you voted for. I'm just looking at you as a human being. And I think that it's such a simple concept, but it's often missed, and it was so important for me to come to that realization with him. It's just like, and it's so refreshing to like look at people, and just because it's taxing to like have to have all these, boundaries and all of these different, things that you got to judge people on. And well, I can't talk to them because they're this. It's refreshing just to look at have a conversation with a person, and it's just a pure conversation. And this person could be as far from you as East is from West, as far as your philosophy, thinking. It's just refreshing to be able to look at people in a pure way. And what you said is so important. It's like some people just want to be looked at that way. They just want to be treated like, outside of whatever you believe or whatever you think, you matter to them. And that's so important. That's a lesson that, it was late in life that I learned it, but I'm glad that he was able to help me to transition into that type of thought process.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Tamarian, what about you?
I think one of the things that you said on Sunday really stuck out is that, like, you had mentioned how we can begin to love like God. And you said sometimes it's about as simple as doing the opposite of what you've been doing. So, if you're normally angry, or if you're or how you respond to somebody is normally aggressive, why don't you pause for a second and you do the opposite? Maybe you greet them with love, or instead of having, just the way you said it, because that's what I've had to start doing recently, is like, Because I've learned now that, that kind of love, that's an inside transfer. That's an inside job. Like, it has to start from the inside. As much as I'd love to, like, go out and be, I take that back, I wouldn't love to go out and be an advocate. As much as, I changed the entire structure of my sentence. Anyways, it's the little things that I'm trying to do differently now. I'm trying to do the opposite of the things that I've been doing, because I've seen the consequences of the choices that I made that were based solely on what I wanted. I've seen the damage it's done, the collateral, and I see the things left in the wake of that. And so now I just simply try to do the opposite of that, instead of taking, try to give. And you had mentioned that. It's like, so if you're always taking something, try to give something. And so, those little things, and heeding to those moments, and heeding to those calls, and like waiting for the right opportunity, instead of like going out and trying to like make amends by yourself, through your own works. What the scripture says that we're saved through faith and not through our works. And I think oftentimes I was out there trying to right my wrongs by immediately trying to fit as many rights as I could to one day. Mm-hmm. And it's like, at that point, you're just trying to check the list. It's like, look, I'm trying to make rights. It's like, no, let's, and I'm sure God is looking, it's like, look, I understand. I get it. Baby steps. Wait for one meaningful moment instead of trying to, make your own moment. It's like, wait for me to speak to you and say, now's the time. Because I had a moment like that this week. Because I think it was like a month and a half ago, I was at a store somewhere, and this dude handed me a 20 because he thought I had lost it. And I was like, I would have sworn I put that 20 in my wallet. And so I went and checked, and the 20 was there. And I was like, okay, so where's this guy who gave me this money? I was like, I don't need this kind of money, man. I make bad decisions with money like this. And so what I chose to do, I was like, you know what? Because it's not mine to take. I didn't feel like it was mine to take. I said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on to this, and I'm going to wait for a moment to give it away to somebody else who really needs it. And there were a few things that, would happen between that month of me getting in. And I was like, nah, I don't think that's the right moment. Nah, I don't think that's the right person. And so I held on to it, and I held on to it. I was like, I'm not spending this. I was like, it's not mine. I was like, I'm not getting in trouble with God. No, I'm not. I'm not doing that to myself again. And it wasn't until this week that one of my coworkers was talking to me about something. And I guess she had come up short. I don't know what was going on. I do know, but I don't feel like it's my place to share it. And so I was like, and I felt like God said, this is the moment. This is the moment. And it's like, hey, I heard what you were saying earlier. I have this to give you. And so it's like it's those. I feel like it's those tiny moments where you wait for God to lead you and say, this is the time. And it's like, and it was such a meaningful moment because I held on to that 20 for so long. And, and I really was just like waiting and listening. I was like, no, this ain't the time. Because I had seen some things, and I was like, nah. Yeah. And I even had needs of my own come up in between them, but I was like, that's not the deal. That's not the pact I struck with myself. I was like, I said I was going to wait for God to tell me when. And it took time, but I felt like it happened. And, it's just those tiny moments where you can practice the love of God. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's real good. That's awesome. And I like that, looking for God's leading. We don't have to like manufacture love. God is giving us opportunities to love. And so when we're looking for it, when we're aware, we're going to find those, and we're going to be able to do them. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you being here. This was really fun. It was a really good conversation. I appreciate all your thoughts. Do you guys have anything in closing you want to say about the Love Connection series?
It was just really, it ministered to me in really, really intimate ways. Like, it really, things in my personal life, that this series really just, it really just showed me what I need to do as far as focusing on how I show love, and focusing on making sure that God is at the center of that love. And it was just like the last sermon, that one was probably the one that that hit me the most, that ministered to me the most, and it hit me because I've been having some struggles in the area of showing God's love and loving those that are unlovable. So this series really gave me some insight and some homework to do.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you. Yeah. Anything you got, Tamarian? You don't have to. I'm just leaving it for you. All right. Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope that it blessed you. And we hope to see you on Sunday, whether in person or online. Thanks, Cross Church.